Hello, everyone. So, for this semester, the topic that I've really chosen to delve into is ethics in graphic design and how they apply to the decisions that we make. Ethics has always been a really important topic for me because I personally care a lot about how my decisions affect the people around me, and in turn, the business I work for and how it affects my community, my environment, so on and so forth. So, one of the first times ethics was really brought up in the world of graphic design was when the First Things First manifesto came out in the early 1960s. This was because our world had become overly saturated with advertising and the use of mass messaging to impact our environment and our surroundings. The manifesto was a call to action to take a step back and to reconsider our role as designers in our environment. With such an influential power, we needed to rethink how we were pursuing our jobs and what kind of jobs we were pursuing. With that, let's take a quick look at the difference between morals and ethics, because this is a common topic of debate when deciding the difference between right and wrong. Morals, according to the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, is more of a set of personal values, where ethics is an overarching standard that the masses can apply to. A good way to look at it as you can be a very ethical person but have no morals because you understand what is acceptable in public. But you can be a very moral person and be lacking in what is generally considered ethical values. Take, for example, religious extremists. They are morally doing what they believe is right according to their religion and their God. But ethically, most people, and the entire planet for that matter, would tend to disagree. This obviously is not a situation that is design related, but it's a good way to understand the difference between how your moral values can be very ethically different than what the entirety of people have decided is good and bad and acceptable. So with that, I think that we need to reference Stephen Sagmeister and his, I think, probably pretty well-known article, Doing Good, where he acknowledges that when we contemplate what good design is versus bad design, what we really should be considering is aesthetic beauty, but also content and how it affects the lives of the people that we're putting it out into the world to be received by. Um, if you provide something beautiful, but the content is crap, are they really getting anything out of your product? So, in doing good with design, we must remember that it's more than just what we're putting out into the world. So with this next slide, I want to delve into what design ethics is really all about. So I got this whole sort of breakdown of where design ethics comes into play from the book Good by Lucine Roberts. She really confronts the fact that ethics in design is more than just, you know, uh, putting out a good product. It delves into multiple realms. First off, we need to look at the personal side of design. This concept was also noted in one of my sources, Redefining Design Ethics, where the author is acknowledging that with this new digital age, we need to really reconsider our business practices as designers, because the amount of work and thought and process that we put into our projects is completely different than the way that it used to be. So we need to reconsider how we price things, whether we have the skill level, whether we're putting in the work for a quality product versus just throwing something out there that's visually appealing. With that, research is incredibly important when you're considering what it takes to be an ethical designer. You might find that your client wants something that they think is going to be the best for them, but if you don't put in the research to understand their consumer, you may not realize that that direction that your client thinks is the best actually isn't. Maybe they want to do a social media campaign, but they're marketing to an older crowd. Obviously, that's probably not the best direction. So with that, we need to consider being honest with our clients. As an ethical designer, it's always important to be honest about the work you're putting in, your skill level, and if you find a controversial issue within their product, that kind of thing needs to be discussed, because in the end, if you want to help them, you need to help yourself by being upfront about all the situations at hand. So next we're going to look at the more public side of design, and by that I mean what we're putting out into the world for people to see. First and foremost, you need to consider your client, right? Who are you willing to pursue? There's this really great article called Road to Hell. Well, it's more of an essay, but still. And it confronts the issues of how far are you willing to go when it comes to your client? Are you willing to take on a client that lies a little bit about the health benefits of their product, but they still have something really great? Or are you willing to go as far as designing for a client who puts out a product that will most likely kill their consumer? I've been using cigarettes as a really great example for that. And the cigarette market, they are always trying to push on younger and younger crowds. So ethically, are you okay with marketing to teenagers, or would you prefer to go on a lighter route and maybe just lie slightly with packaging? And connected to all that comes the research, and not just the research on the back end about the product, but the research about your actual client that you're pursuing. You need to know if they're a reputable client. Are they ethical in their business practices? You wouldn't want to find yourself working with a company for years and then realize after the fact that they've been doing really terrible things on the back end. It comes out, there's now lawsuits, and you're mixed up with all of that, and now your design is representing that company. You also, with your research, need to look into what's environmentally friendly and the value of the product and the quality of the product and how it's going to affect the world, and whether we're putting out something that is necessary or if it's just going to end up being a waste and in a landfill and polluting the ocean and all of that terrible stuff that's now becoming really big issues within our modern mentality. A huge role with all of that is our messaging. So one of my really great sources, Creating a Disturbance, confronts the fact that messaging can be incredibly powerful, but it can also be incredibly harmful. We can really sway the consumer in one direction or another, and that can have some psychological effects if we're lying about a product and its ability to benefit their lives. With messaging, we also have to look at the aesthetic. If we're pumping out an aesthetically pleasing product that doesn't actually have any value, we're lying to the consumer in that way as well. The aesthetic of the project can really add or take away from quality of life when it comes to how the consumer is taking that project and the value that they're finding purely based on the aesthetic. I mean, we all walk down the aisle and sometimes find ourselves picking a product over the packaging and how pretty it looks versus actually turning it around and looking at the ingredients and seeing what's the best product for me in the grand scheme of it. So if we're designing something to look better than it really is, in the end, we are actually lying to our consumer that way. So then it all comes back to honesty. On both ends, honesty is super important, and we're going to get into why. On the front end and on the back end, honesty is incredibly important because it not only determines our relationship with our client, but also our client's relationship with their consumer. Responsibility is becoming more and more important. We need to start taking responsibility and ownership of our work. Authorship is, I think, coming back around as something that is very important in the world of design. With that, we need to have integrity about our product that we're pushing out and the work that we're putting into that product. We need to have accountability in the information and the messaging and the effects it's going to have on our consumers and our client. With all that, if we can pursue honesty and gain all of these things, we're going to end up having trust. Trust from our client that we know what we're doing and that we can help them push out the best product, and trust from the consumer that the product is exactly what they think that they're getting and that it's everything that we're saying that it is. When we can get all that, we're going to have loyalty from our clients and from our consumers. If they believe they're getting the best thing, they're going to keep coming back. And with all that comes respect. Respect is so important, I think, now, and with social media and just mass messaging, if you have a respectable product, you're automatically going to be more marketable and profitable all around. So, with honesty and ethical design, I think we need to sort of take a step back and look at how unethical design can really affect the world around us. Because we can create lies and sell them to the people, and the people will believe that those lies are truth. And in turn, that can cause some major psychological damage. Um, I wanted to use body imagery just as a good example because I think it's something that everyone can relate to. In today's modern media, I think body shaming is coming out as something that's super negative, but it's still heavily used, right? We take a beautiful woman and skew her proportionately in a way that is unrealistic. It's going to skew the consumer's view of how they should look and feel. And if we're lying and creating these unrealistic standards, not just for our bodies, but for our products, people are going to feel lied to. And this doesn't just affect women, obviously, it clearly affects men. So it's just something to consider when you're putting your messaging out there and your product and your visuals. Are you creating a falsehood with what you're putting out there? And is that falsehood going to damage your consumer in the long run? Is it worth lying about your product and hurting people just to get a few extra bucks? I think that's what doing good is really about. So we're coming back full circle, obviously, with Steven Sagmeister's whole concept of what good really is, because design influences our standards of living and our quality of life. Because, as we said earlier, design is so incredibly influential. It is literally everywhere. Just like if you walk into Times Square, you are getting just blasted with a mass of advertising and design and imagery. And if we consider that the average consumer isn't standing around like we designers may be, individually nitpicking different things and understanding the background of that product, the consumer is taking in all of this subconsciously. They're taking in the messaging at face value, and it's going to affect their perspective and their quality of life. So I think I've hopefully given some really good examples of how ethical design is so much more than just what we're putting out there. It's much, much deeper than that. Obviously, design and ethics is more of a personal decision than anything else. So, as designers, I hope we can take some of these things in mind when we're pursuing our next client, and hopefully, it's helped you see how your decisions really affect the world around you. Thank you.